Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending where you folks are. I trust that you have received the first lecture from John, who is responsible to communicate that to you. And when you've seen it, this is about energy finance class, remember. Supposed to be on Thursdays when the classes were held on campus, but now it's online. So when you looked at that lecture or saw or listened to it, I hope everything flowed very well and there was no difficulty in following it. I hope not, because we followed the same procedure that when I said we, that is John and I, that we've done it for the last 2 years in spring of 21 and 20. So if that went well, there is no reason why I would assume that this would not go or did not go equally well in my first lecture. And if there is something you want to ask John, we'll communicate with him. He'd be more than happy to explain everything to you. He is good at that, okay? And so having said that, the previous lecture that I gave, the first one on energy finance, was very broad, as you could tell. There's nothing but finance. We didn't discuss finance, and we just gave you an overview, the big picture of what to expect in this course. In that regard, I shared the syllabus with you and how I'm going to carry on this course. And also, now the grading is going to be done and so on. Okay. And some introductory remarks that the lecture would not exceed 2.5 hours, probably closer to 2 hours, because these are really packed lectures, which I normally, if I were in person, would take longer to finish this lecture of 2 hours. But this is very concentrated when you're just talking on and on and on without a break. You can put a lot of stuff into a short time period, okay? These are just general remarks I want to make. We haven't started anything substantive yet. So having said that, let's get on with the lecture of supposedly. This is the reason I said energy finance. Why I said supposedly. I could start with heavy duty, not heavy duty finance itself, but I'm digressing a bit because if you remember, I may have said last time in my lecture that my desire is to give you more than just finance. And in that regard, today's lecture will be not directly related to finance, but it'll open your mind, give you a global perspective of what to expect and what is the changes happening in the global oil economy. And in finance-related and non-finance-related changes, okay? And because I feel that given my background, that I've lectured this several hundred times all over the world on the subject that I'm going to talk about in a minute, and there's no reason why you, my students in Austin, should not benefit from what others benefited all over the globe. And they were, again, I say, all company executive, government officials, congressmen, senators, engineers, geologists, economists, finance people, law people, and presidents of companies, and all over the world, okay? I'm not trying to show off that these are the people, but to give you an idea that you're going to be receiving a little bit of what I taught them, that's over a longer period of time, of course. It doesn't, with them, it takes, my typical lecture is 5 days of the week, and it lasts for 2 weeks. Now, that is this subject of global oil economics and finance. That is what we're going to talk about, global oil. It's going to be global oil, big picture, and international agreements, and there's several things wrapped into those 2 weeks of 5 days each, 8 hours a day. That's a lot of teaching, okay? But you're going to get a little feel for what they got on the first day of the 2 weeks, because that is what I introduced, the global oil situation, what is happening in the world. And so you will get the same substance from me in terms of lecturing and that they received. So I thought it would be nice for you to have an understanding, because Very soon you're going to graduate and you'll be into the so-called real world of oil and gas, the industry, the economy of oil and gas in the world. And I thought it'd be useful for you to know where the world oil industry and the global oil picture is going, the economy of oil in the world. Let me make a statement first. The oil business over years has changed tremendously. So much so that I like to believe what I see in the oil business today is in no way the same what I saw in the oil business 50 years ago. It's totally different. There's a big change, new developments, new things are happening in the oil business. And that is, now I'm not talking just technology. I'm talking a very broad subject of what are the new things happening. Whether good or bad is another point, but the oil business has changed considerably, so much so that I believe that there are structural changes at the very foundation of this business. So this is why you're going into this business at a time when the things have changed so much and are still changing. I'm using the word change a number of times, but let's talk about just the word change itself, not about oil and gas, but change itself, to get an idea, what am I going to be talking about? If I were to ask a question, which in this setting of online teaching, I cannot, is change good or bad? That's all. I'm not talking about just the word change. Example, here is a tie. Sometimes the tires get big, wide, like this one. Sometimes they get narrow. They've changed. Sometimes I've got a coat, there are 2 buttons, and sometimes there are 3 buttons. They change. Fashion, so on, so forth. Okay. So that means that the question is just change in life, generally change, is it good or bad? So once we establish that, then we'll narrow the subject of change to the oil business and focus only on the oil business for the next hour and a half. And I think I'll pack a lot of information about your industry. I'm calling you being in the oil business now, where it will be soon, of what to expect. To give you an idea what I mean by change, is it good or bad? I'll address it myself. Let me talk about General Motors. General Motors, when I came to the States in the early 70s, were the largest manufacturers of cars in the whole world. They made more cars than anybody else in the world, General Motors. So today, do they? No, they don't. What has happened? Change. Why did they lose that position of being the biggest? Change. Now, at this time, I know you folks are a bit lost. So what is he talking about? Change every time he opens his mouth? Now I'll explain to you what it means. How do I do it? What kind of cars did? Well, you weren't around, you're too young. And I can tell you in the 70s and basically in the 70s, General Motors made the big, huge cars like Cadillacs and Buicks and Pontiacs. In fact, I had one of them with a Cadillac, but it was very used. I only paid $400. No, for that car, I paid $530 used car, you know. But it will only get me about 10 miles to a gallon. I could afford, well, barely, I could afford it as a young engineer because, why? Because the price of gasoline, and you're not going to believe it. I repeat, you're not going to believe it. I've been there, I've seen it, done it. Was 19-20 cents a gallon, not a liter, because many of your companies are coming as foreign students from countries where the unit is liter when you pour gasoline in the tank of the car. Here I'm talking 20 cents for a gallon of gasoline. So I could just pull up at a gas station and say, well, no, petrol station, gasoline station, say, fill it up. And all stations were full service. Never had a self-service station that I saw at that time in the early 70s. Okay, now what happened? A few dollars, will fill up my tank. The Cadillac at that time had 26-gallon capacity to fill up the tank. So what's the point? All around, the Ford was making big cars, Chrysler was making big cars, General Motors was making huge cars. Gasoline was cheap, almost giveaway price. Now, change happened. Now the word change comes up in the conversation. What change happened? 1973, to be exact, roughly about October 1973, 73, there was a war, we refer to it as the Yom Kippur War between the Arabs and the Israelis. And as a result, the price of crude oil went from $3 overnight to $12 a barrel, quadruple, I mean, within less than a week. So the price of gasoline went up to from 20 cents to 80 cents, maybe $1 a gallon. Do you think I or my friends down the street could afford to drive a Cadillac? No. Couldn't afford it because the price of gasoline had gone up at a point of 5 times. How can I put gasoline in the car and fill it up with gasoline in the tank? So what happened? Terrible news for the Cadillac manufacturers of General Motors. The cars were not selling. People could afford to pay for the gasoline. That was the time when our friends from Japan realized this is a great opportunity for them to start manufacturing cars. Because General Motors cars were not selling because of the price of gasoline per gallon. So the Japanese came along and started manufacturing Toyotas, the Mazda, the Subarus, and God knows all of these that you see on the road, all the Japanese cars. You know, the Hondas, so on. What were they doing? These cars were putting 30 miles to a gallon versus Cadillac's 12 miles to a gallon. So what am I going to buy? Obviously, I would buy a Japanese car now. I can afford it. That's what happened. Change in the price of gasoline was a wonderful opportunity for the manufacturers of Japanese cars, and they flooded the market while the Cadillac manufacturers' cars stayed in the showroom. So the good news of this change, remember the word change, was good for whom? The Japanese, our friends there. Terrible for whom? The General Motor guy, the fellows are making Cadillacs. That means change is good and bad, depending on which side you're sitting on. Let me give you another idea, and then we'll move on to oil, and we'll move on to another subject related only to oil and nothing else. This has nothing to do with oil. It's more like manufacturers of cars and change. Now we talk about another idea about IBM. What happened to IBM? Same thing. IBM was one of the biggest manufacturers of computers, mainframe computers. They were it. I believe they had over 400,000 employees. Does IBM manufacture even a single computer today? No. From the biggest to zero, it was whatever they could, they sold it to Lenovo, the company overseas, I believe it's a Chinese company. And they're the ones who manufacture the computer there instead of IBM. Now, what happened then? You say, well, what are we talking about in terms of IBM? IBM became big on the basis of making a mainframe computer. They were the only folks in town doing that. But market demand, let's talk about US students. In my class, I don't know how many finance students we have in this class. I'm about 20, 19 to be exact, that's the last count, 19 or 20. Do you all have a computer? Yes. I'm talking to you through this computer that I have here. How many? 20 students had bought 20 computers. Are your computers what? Mainframe? Not one. All this desktop and whatever we call the laptop and so on. So while the thinking of IBM was to continue making mainframe, the behavior of the customer wanted what? A mainframe? No, but they wanted an Apple computer, like the one I'm lecturing from, laptops and so on. So that's what happened. The IBM did not recognize that market had changed. So much so that nobody was buying this. Why would they buy a mainframe? What did they need the mainframe for, the students in my class? But everybody moved to Dell, and then they moved to Apple and so on. Apple is almost a $3 trillion company at this time. The biggest ever, 3 trillion. We'll talk about what do you mean by 3 trillion? What is the value of the company? How do we value a company? Okay, how did the word 3 trillion come? But I'll explain in part of my lecture of finance later on. So consumer behavior change. Good news for whom? One side, the small manufacturers of computers, and the other side was IBM, the big mainframe guy. So it depends on which side you are on, okay? So you cannot rule out change is good or bad. It depends, okay? So now having said that, I could go on and on and on, giving you similar examples of recognizing change and doing something about it. But this being a short lecture of a couple of hours, I have to concentrate on oil business only. You said you've talked about General Motors, the car guys, you've talked about IBM, what about us? Well, let's start there. Changes, or you can call it developments, in the global. I'm not talking here or there, I'm talking around the globe. How has the oil business changed, which is the crux, which is the main subject of today's lecture, is the developments in the oil and gas business, no other business. I'm going to touch at least on a dozen of them. There are many more. If I were giving a one-week lecture, you will hear probably 40, 50 of those changes, but I won't have the time. Nor is that the nature of this course. It's a finance-related course, but this is a little courtesy I want to show to open your mind to what you're going to inherit as your oil business when you get there. Let's start with randomly. Number one, competition. How has the competition in the oil business, global oil business, changed? That's a good way to start. In the past, 4 decades back or before, there was a book written on the oil business. It was called The Seven Sisters. It's a very nice, catchy name, so everybody remembers the name, Seven Sisters, about the oil business now. What do you mean by seven? This book was about the 7 largest oil companies in the world at that time. That's all they were. So the writer, the author, called it the Seven Sisters. And let's say, who are they if you want? And I'll tell you who they are. Exxon, you want to write it down, fine. Mobil Oil, Chevron, Texaco, Shell, BP. The 7th one, again, an American company. The first 4 were American, or were. I don't think they all are at this time. They have come together and called them something else. I'm going to talk about that. And the 7th one is a name you're not familiar with. It's one of the 7 sisters was Gulf Oil. So what? Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Texaco, and Gulf were 5 American systems that were in the list of the 7 largest, and the 2 Europeans were BP at that time and Shell. These were the 7 gigantic companies. When you have 7 companies in the world, the whole world is theirs to play in. I don't think that's much of a competition. These seven sisters are having a difficult time surviving because they were not used to this competition that I'm going to talk about now. They're still living in the past when there were only seven. With this competition, they have to adjust their thinking and do something differently. That's what we're going to talk about. The competition, who are they? Let me draw this on the board here. I hope you can see the circle. Maybe I should make it a little more, well, it's clear. Yeah, you can see that. The reason I did it very lightly before, with the blue pen, and you can see it, is because if I've done this all over the world, so I should be, understand what I can do with the whiteboard, because once you do it with deep impression, with dark blue or red or black or any, then it's difficult to erase that. And in the background, you see still a circle when I'm writing something else. But therefore, I have to be very careful how deep I should push. That's the globe. I have noticed that you can see it. That is the domain of the seven sisters. That's what they had to work with, and that's not competition. Then I'll just roughly draw this here. Let's put let's do this here. Hope you can see. It says, I'll read it in NOCs of OPEC. So OPEC countries started having their own NOCs. Okay. And they started producing their own oil. Now, previously, this area here, this oil was produced by the IOCs, I meaning the Seven Sisters. Now their area left for them in the world to produce is here because the NOCs have taken over part of the world. Then we have a big chunk of NOCs. So careful, I'm worried about making it too dark. Of non-OPEC. Every country in the world now has maybe even Guatemala, Honduras, have a national oil company, NOCs, national. For the OPEC, I've done this much bigger than this because NOCs of non-OPEC, to give you an idea, is Petronas, P-E-T-R-O-N-A-S. You folks have not heard about Petronas very much here, have you, in the United States? And I've taught there in Malaysia. It's the national oil company in Malaysia, one of the fastest growing companies in the whole world. That's Malaysia. And we have ONGC, Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, or Commission, sometimes we call it, of India. Very aggressive, a big producer of oil all over the world. Not OPEC, India. Brazil, Petrobras. Start remembering these names, please, because they're going all over the world, and so on and so forth. Not OPEC countries, but non-OPEC companies, okay? And I can give you a long list. I can give you a very long list, but why take your time? Then we have our friend, let's put it here, NOCs of Europe. Europeans, besides the Shell and BP, become familiar with these names, is ENI. ENI is an Italian company. I've lectured to them about 200 times. I'll tell you why 200 times, because for 1990, the last year I used to go there to Italy 5 to 7 times every year, because there's a rule there in the company that everybody is one of the largest oil companies in the whole world, by the way, but like almost like a Chevron or a Texaco, that whoever had to be promoted, including the chairman of that company, is like a Chevron chairman, has to have to listen to me. So they said, Dr. Malik, come down here as many times as you can, because everybody in the company has to listen to you to get promoted. So I had an open invitation. I would go there and come back and go there and come back, okay? Now, E and I, don't forget them. They're all over the world. I've lectured their company, their subsidiaries in Venezuela and in Egypt and so on. And so the point is, another one, European, is Statoil of Norway. And it used to be, another one used to be Repsol from Spain, which has joined with the National Oil Company of Argentina. Now they've become one. And OMV is a long German name, the National Oil Company of where? Austria. They're not the old Shell and all, and the other one was BP. So that, what do you see here? Yeah, the European companies have become aggressive, not the Seven Sisters I was talking about. Then we have what is happening all the time? No, before that, let me finish this thought. China. There are 3 large Chinese oil companies. Get used to their names. They're everywhere you can imagine. Looking for oil, exploration and production. One is CNPC, largest. China National Petroleum Corporation, CNPC. The second one is CNOOC, China National Offshore Oil Corporation. The third one is Sinopec, SINOPEC, Sinopec. These are the 3 very large exploration production companies. They are really large, believe me. Now, and they are very aggressive in looking for oil all over Africa and Latin America. I have traveled in many countries where they have been taking over oil operations. So what is happening is the question. Now, these are all NOCs of China. First, not in that sequence and timetable, the old 7 sisters that I named are having a tough time because of competition from the OPEC NOCs. Whatever is left, the non-OPEC take over. Whatever is left, the Europeans take over. Whatever left, the Chinese took over. Leaving what? Every time the others come into the oil industry, oil economy in the world, the old 7 sisters have to give them room. This one nobody's heard about, so I'll make a very dotted line, because this is not much now, but at one time, people couldn't believe what were there, and now they're gone anyway. But the Japanese, nobody heard of Japanese in the exploration business. I used to have, in the past, the names of every Japanese oil and gas company, and there were 127. Let me just reach up and show you. Just give me a second, I'm going to pass this to you. Here is a list of, I know you can't see it, but I just wanted to show you of every Japanese company in the world, and the 7 pages of this. No, of course, most of them disappeared, maybe only 4 or 5 are left. But never mind the Japanese. So what does that do, to the old 7 sisters? This is the only area left for them to, not physically. This is the only area in the industrial economy of all that is left for them. So every time somebody comes in, the old 7 sisters, because they are still thinking they are the leaders. They're not the leaders anymore. You can see who is taking their place. This, I would even venture to say that this old 7 sisters, they have a difficult time surviving even. Because you can see evidence is there. Very obvious. Mobil was one company, Exxon was separate, and now they're Exxon Mobil together. Texaco was a separate company, and Chevron, now they're together. Why in the world are they coming together? I'm going to discuss that at length. What is this acquisition? Why are they joining hands? For 100 years, they were all by themselves, and suddenly we find the joining hands. That will be discussed at length during the mergers and acquisitions. I have some ideas, my thoughts to share with you. It's very different from most anybody you're going to hear about from. Then the 7th or the 5th American, or the 7 or the list of 7 is the Gulf. And Gulf disappeared. It doesn't even exist. In 1983, it was acquired by Chevron, or 84, I believe. So enough said about geopolitics. Talk about competition. So put that as a change, put it as a number 1 on your list of changes. Maybe I should write them down. So I just write down competition. So you can note. So change, development, if you want to call it. In the global oil economy, or global oil industry. Let me see if you can read it. Yeah, you can. But anyway, since I'm lecturing, you can take notes from what I'm talking about directly in your handwriting. Because I'm worried because I can end up filling the whole board, and therefore I'm being very careful about not writing that much as I would want to in big letters. Number 1. Competition. Let's see if you can read that. Okay, I hope you can. The second one I might as well write it because I'm studying. Geopolitics. That's a change with respect to the oil economy. So what you say, well, what has geopolitics got to do with oil business? A lot, much more than you can imagine. So let's talk about that. Before the breakup of the Soviet Empire, USSR, USSR does not exist today, in 1990 or so, it became how many? 15 republics. 15 republics, 15 separate nations, let's call it. So USSR really doesn't exist, it's 15 republics. Some of these republics are very, very large. It's a geopolitical change. Using the former Soviet Union, FSU, as an example of its role, politics, geopolitics, and oil. USSR, when it existed, is a huge landmass. It extends from Leningrad in the west to Vladivostok in the east, and I believe there are like 9 or 10 time zones. Time zones. From here to Vienna, from here to Paris, 7 hours. From one end of your USSR to the other is like 9 or 10 hours, depending on the time of the year. That gives you an idea how vast is the country. It takes you about 8 to 9 hours to fly from here, Austin, to London or to Paris or to or Rome. That tells you here in this country, and that's only 7-hour time difference. But if it's 9 hours, it would be a huge country. Please, that's all I'm trying to tell you. In the past, could you look for oil in USSR? No, it was a closed economy. Nobody, no oil company worked there. They produced a lot of oil, but no oil company was allowed to go look for oil. But now it's open. Now you can look for oil. Give you an example. One of the republics or nations that has been carved out of the former Soviet Union is called Kazakhstan, K-A-Z-A-K-H-S-T-A-N, Kazakhstan. Okay. In fact, recently they're having a lot of problems there. You might be reading about it. It's only one republic or country came out of the USA. You know how big it is? Most people in the oil business have never heard about it, or not in the oil, any business. If you take all of Western Europe together, all of it, Norway, Sweden, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Portugal, Spain, Italy, all of them, Norway, Denmark, all of these countries of West together are smaller than one country is Kazakhstan. That tells you how big it is. Huge. Most of you have never heard about it, and it produces a lot of oil now. Most of you in any business and don't even know what the capital of that country is. It's called Astana, A-S-T-A-N-A, Astana. Big producer for oil. We can talk about this country later on. That gives you, because of geopolitical change, the world of oil is expanded. They can go to so many countries. That's the point I want to make. Big changes in geopolitics have expanded the opportunities for oil companies. Till the pandemic business, I used to go to Kazakhstan every year, very far away. From Amsterdam, it was a 7-hour flight to Kazakhstan to the city of Almaty, Almaty. That's like the commercial capital, not the political capital of the country. Very beautiful city. 7 hours from even Amsterdam. Why did you go there every year? Because that was an invitation, at least once a year for many years, because they wanted to learn about the oil business. Even the oil minister was my student. Okay, so this gives you an idea the changes. Previously, all of the Kazakhstan, these countries were closed to anybody, not only oil, for any business, and now they're opening up. So that's the one point I wanted to make about. What does that do then? Let me take you to another point. That brings about a lot of competition for the oil countries. Countries, I said. Now, because of this change, I'm adding something else now. Previously, if the government of a country, pick a country now, Namibia, or maybe of Angola, let's say, and I've lectured in Angola too, did not treat the oil companies well previously, before the breakup of the Soviet Union. The oil companies were stuck in Angola because there was not many places they could go look for oil. That has changed. Now, if Angolan government does not treat them nicely, the oil companies can say, "Oh, thank you very much. We can go to Kazakhstan now." So now to attract them in Angola, they have to come up with nice contracts for the oil companies, to make it attractive for them to come to Angola and not go to Kazakhstan. That's what's happening. There's a lot of competition in the world now because of this opening up of countries to foreign businesses, oil being one of them. Same thing with China and Vietnam. Vietnam has oil. We were bombarding Vietnam, but now we are saying, well, that's a sin. We want to go look for oil there. They've opened up. So in fact, my second course, as I may have mentioned earlier, is International Petroleum Agreements and Contracts. In that course, I expand more on this because we talk about how do countries attract oil companies to come there? What are the incentives that they have to, why would I go to Norway and not go to the UK? Because both countries have a lot of oil. Well, because this country X versus this country Y offered more tax incentives, so to speak. But that's all discussed in the second course called International Petroleum Concessions and Agreements. Okay, I've been doing it for quite a long time. And that brings up, what kind of agreements do we have? Agreements have changed a lot. If you were taking that petroleum, I'm talking petroleum agreements only. It's all about petroleum now. The oldest kind of, and that's discussed in the second course. And if believe me, if you're going to be working for the oil business, I guarantee you'll be needing that course because that all deals with contracts overseas and you'll be working overseas. There's a guarantee of all the oil and all this competition, all the companies I'm talking about, they're all overseas. They're not here in the United States. That's when that course becomes very useful. What is a contract between Exxon and the government of Kazakhstan and so on? The oldest kind of an agreement contract in the oil business for exploration is called the concession. Concession is C-O-N-E-S-S-I-O-N, concession. All contracts in the United States are concession by nature. You know, they have the attributes of concession. Then in 1960, a new kind of a contract, type of a contract was introduced in the global oil business. It's called a production sharing contract, normally called PSC. 1960 started in Indonesia. Most developing countries have contracts based on what is called a PSC. Production sharing contract. The third kind of contract is a joint venture. And finally, the fourth kind is a service contract. For example, all contracts that the government of Iraq offers to foreign companies, oil companies, of course, are service contracts, not concession, not PSA, not joint venture, service contract. So in order to understand more of what are these changes in the contracts, then you'll have to take that course. You don't have to look at the PF, any background in legal, because I don't discuss legal aspects in that course anyway. For that course, to look at the legal side, you have to go to the law school, not in my class. I'm looking at the operations and the economics and how do you make a good agreement, how do you negotiate agreements, all those things. And that is taught in that class, particularly how to negotiate them, what to look for, what are the merits and demerits of different kinds of agreements. For example, the very thing I would say in the first lecture is, what is a good, I define what is an agreement. What is a good agreement? Same question to you. Very simple. A good agreement, one that is good for both sides, the government and the company. That's a good agreement. I've never lectured, and I've lectured this all over the world too. I've never given an idea about this, what is a good, unless I believe it's good for both sides to the audience. I don't push for this contract or that contract. I'm not paid for this company or that company or that government. I'm a teacher. Teacher thinks, lays down what he thinks is right. I couldn't be sold to propagate this or that, depending on what the nature of the company or the government is. Oh heavens, you couldn't buy me on that one. So, okay, so that give me an example. What is different in new agreements versus the old? Besides many, many things other than these couple I'm going to talk about. In the past, governments in foreign countries didn't emphasize the environmental factors to look at. The environmental considerations of least consequence to the government 30, 40 years back. So they never introduced in the context, what are you going to do, company, for environmental protection? No more. That's the first thing government is going to say, particularly because a lot of activities offshore for oil. Company in the contract write down, how are you going to use this operations environmentally clean, or how are you going to keep the environment safe? And so you have to be, it should be in the contract. That's a big change. Let me give you another one. Technology transfer. Technology does not mean technology as you look at it as engineers. The generic word would be knowledge transfer. In all agreements now, petroleum agreements, of course, understood, have a very strong emphasis on you, the company that is coming here to Angola, tell us how are you going to transfer your knowledge to us, the Angolan or the Nigerians or the Ghana people or people from Madagascar, so that one day we can do all this business ourselves. So there are two things, a lot of emphasis. We've never had it in the past. How are you going to keep the environment safe and healthy and clean, and how are you going to transfer the technology? Okay, that's a part of the other course. But it's a change. Talk about a change. Let me write it down, and then the next change, we're going to talk about oil price. I'm going to write down petroleum agreement. have changed dramatically. The fourth change is what oil price. And I'm going to write on a couple of things here. You take note of it. Then I'll talk about it briefly. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm constantly aware that, are you seeing it properly? You know, I'm very worried about it. I'll say that loudly. So you can write it down. Net back, one word, net back pricing. That's oil pricing, of course. Is one. The second, write it down. Futures market. The third one is spot price. Spot price. And the fourth is barter trade. Net back pricing, futures market, spot price, and barter trade. On the top where I said oil price, write down new, where it says oil price, new oil pricing mechanisms. That explains the title of these 4 types. If you just wrote oil price, that's okay, but if you write new ways to price oil, new oil pricing mechanism, ways to price oil. And this will also take us, and you will be you'll be educated on the subject, how oil is traded, bought and sold in the world. We're going to open up that discussion. I know you folks are E&P people, exploration production people, but you should know what happens when you produce the oil. How does it get sold? Do you go to the stock market? How do you get stock market? Do you go to the exchange of commodities exchange? You have to find out. And what are the mechanisms? Is it bought and sold through futures market or futures trading? We don't know. So there's going to be a full lecture. I think it'll take all of a full lecture, all of it, to cover all of these 4 points here. What is a new net back pricing? What is a futures market, and so on. So that'll be very likely it'll come after the spring break. I think I said I'm going to talk about sources of capital till about the spring break or thereafter a little bit, and then mergers and acquisitions and so on, and also oil pricing. So bear with me on that one, okay? Question. Not a change. But no, offshore oil production. Offshore oil production. One way to start is how much oil is produced from offshore areas and what are the offshore areas that are very prominent. Well, the top of the list is, of course, Gulf of Mexico, right in our backyard. Offshore Brazil. Offshore West Africa. Then there are other areas like the North Sea is there, is offshore, and so on. But the focus is a lot in the Gulf of Mexico, offshore Brazil, and West Africa. Any idea how much oil is produced globally from offshore areas? Any idea? I'll give you a figure. Over 40%, closer to 50% is going up like that, up and up and up and up and up. That's a lot of oil and continues to increase in production from offshore areas. We have the technology to go very far. We're going to talk about that, into the sea. So what happens now? How to connect offshore production to oil price. Along the way, I'm teaching you how to connect all these different things I'm putting on the board. You'll realize after a while, you'll see the one picture of the oil business, not separate 5 or 10 or different changes. You'll say, hey man, this looks like one nice mosaic, a picture. Do you have any idea how much oil is produced in the whole world? Nobody knows. No country is going to tell me how much they produce. There's no agency in the world that you are expected to report to. If Saddam were alive, you think he would tell, they call it International Energy Agency in Paris. I have nothing to do with this. Now, I'm going to tell the IEA, International Energy Agency in Paris, how much oil do I produce? Or Libyan Gaddafi is going to tell how much oil I produce? No, of course not. It's just a guessing game of how much oil is produced in the world every day. A good guess would be, I've seen 80 million, no more 80, 90 million, 95 million, maybe 100 million, but 90, 95 is not a wrong number or incorrect number to use. So overall, I would say 90, 95. So since I'm going to divide it by 2, let's make it 100. It's an easy division to divide 100, just divide by 2. There's no decimal involved. So let's say if 100 million barrels of oil are produced every day, give and take some. And if half the oil is produced from offshore areas, what does that amount to? That means what? 50 million barrels of oil are produced from offshore areas. Simple arithmetic. Now, let's talk about that. The offshore production, is it costly, expensive, or is it cheap? Anybody will tell you, the more you go offshore, the more expensive and costly it becomes. So let's talk about that. See the logic here. If the price of oil continues to go down from where it is today and down and down and down and down, what would happen in your mind of oil production offshore when the price starts going down and down and down? Logic tells you that means offshore production will start going down and down and down. Then what? That means there will be less oil in the world produced. The 100 million will come down to maybe 30 million, no, 90 million or 85 million, so on. So there's less oil now because the oil price, and then what logic tells you is simple first lesson of economics. Oil price is governed only by supply and demand. There's nothing about it. No big deal. So if the price of oil goes down and the production of oil goes down, therefore, it will, what would happen to the price of oil? It would begin to rise again. So let me show you what I'm saying. I think you've understood it, but I am tempted to write this down. This is oil price and production price. Production, I hope you can see it. Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, small. If the price of oil goes down, the offshore production will go down. Of course, I've just said it. It's common sense. Up to a point, the price keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. And with the production of oil offshore goes down, then what would happen? As I said, supply and demand, that means the production then will begin to rise again because the price, that means the price will have to rise again for companies to start producing offshore. Obviously, the magic to explain that. I call this might be what you can call it also. I call this floor price. One second. At some point, call it what you want. I call it the oil price goes to a point where the production drops because it's expensive to produce and therefore there's less available in the market and the price will have to go up. Simple as that. Similarly, question is, will the price fall continue to go up? And up and up? No, it will not. Because if it starts going up and up and up, what would happen? You and I are going to move to Japanese cars. Less and less consumption of oil because we're going to save energy and save money because they're going to be expensive because the price went up. So less consumption. What happens? The price of oil comes down. Then this will, I call this the ceiling price. Ceiling top price. So in the past, 20, 30 years ago, even till now, not long ago, we never thought of a ceiling. We thought, hey, the price of oil will continue to go up and up and up and up, linear. Oh, I said, rubbish, can't be. At some point, the price has to come down because there is less consumption, less demand. All this that you've seen, price will move between ceiling and ceiling price, call it ceiling price. We put in the word price here and that's it. Will be explained to you at length in my lecture on oil price. Remember I explained to you, I didn't explain, I just told you that there'd be a full lecture on oil price. Yes, this all will be explained in that lecture on oil price. Remember that, please. So, the point I'm making here is that offshore production has increased. Offshore, write this down as a change number. Right? Offshore production has increased. Okay. Take it off. So I hope you're getting the picture that most everything I'm talking about looks like it's all connected in the oil business. Politics opening up areas where companies can go. So that's causing competition for governments to reduce the taxes so that companies will come there, for obvious reasons. So, so we're going to, let's talk about one more. Let's see if I can, I'll write it here. I'm trying to constantly see whether you can see this part. Let's see if I write it here. Number 6. Let me see from here. Yeah, you can see. Talk about agreements in environment awareness. There's a, especially under my friend Biden, I don't mean a friend that when under our President Biden, I just use it colloquially, has nothing to do with my friendship with him. There is a awareness, environmental awareness, this is L. Big change. I'm going to talk about it. How does it affect the oil and gas business? Big impact on the oil and gas. Let's talk about it. Every time we listen or look at the news, there's always something about the environment all over the globe. Did it happen like that in the past? No. Nobody cared about the environment in the past. I'll give you an example of my own experience. The year is 1972. That's 50 years back. That's half a century ago. I was in Geneva, Switzerland. Why were I there? What was I doing there? And how old am I? Oh, about that was 26, 27, probably somewhere there. Years old. Young man. There's a reason I'm emphasizing on that. What were I doing there? It has to do with the environment. 50 years back, in Geneva, there is the European headquarters. The European headquarters of the United Nations organization is in Geneva. The one you see in New York is a global. This one beautiful. It's like a palace in Geneva. I don't know. Palace of Nations, you can call it. If I want to sound like I know French, I don't know a word of. I know one word of French is mercy. Mercy. What was it? Merci beaucoup. That's it. 2 words. Thank you very much. I hope I got it right. So point being what? That when I was because I was at the United Nations. Why did I say that? Because the Palace of Nations, I like to pronounce like a Palation des Nations or something like that, if you want to sound French and impress people. Probably impressed, Because I was at a conference there, young man, 20-something. It was held at the conference room of the World Health Organization. It had nothing to do with World Health Organization. They had a nice conference room, very auditorium. So they had borrowed that. The United Nations had borrowed it. And this conference was held there. And the reason I'm saying this is because I, 20+ year young man, and what was the conference about? Environment. I'll give you the name. To investigate the problems of environmental management of world energy. to investigate the problems of environmental management of world energy. Oh, big pompous title. The other delegates elected me that's why as a young man, to be the chairman of that committee. Can you imagine? I was very fortunate. So what does the chairman expected to do? He conducts the conference proceedings. Plus, at the end of the day, in every conference, you have a document you produce what came out of the conference of this environmental and energy considerations. And therefore, as chairman, I collected the proceedings and put it in a nice binder on the environment and handed it to the United Nations. Here is our product. It was like a 2 weeks conference, I think. 1972, I don't think I did my job. I gave it to them. Their job was to maybe read it. I doubt even if they turned the title page. I don't think they even turned the cover and read a word out of it. Because environment was not an important subject at that time. Nobody cared about it. Not now. The moment you utter the word environment, there's somebody say, hey, what did you say? What do you mean? What are you up to? So the environmental awareness has brought about a big change in the oil and gas business. Now, why did the word constantly oil, not just the oil and gas business? There's a reason I'm throwing that extra word there of gas. So today, everybody wants to talk about the environment. The question is, which is the cleanest fuel in the world? Fuel, F-U-E-L. Solar energy is not a fuel. Wind energy is not a fuel. Talk on fuel to power generation of power. Electricity. I'm sure you're going to tell me it's gas. Yes, in energy source includes wind and energy and the other thing. Solar, I'm not denying, I'm the fuel. It's gas. So suddenly, because of the environmental consideration and awareness, what has happened? The demand for gas globally is just taken off. Just taken off. Vertically, practically. Either you move it from one country to another by LNG or liquefied natural, or transmission by a pipeline all over the globe. Even the United States is one of the biggest producers of LNG in the world today. We didn't produce any LNG not many years back. Not a cubic foot of gas went into LNG projects. Now we are one of the biggest exporters of LNG in the world. Most of it is going to Europe. Exporters of Indonesia, big, Qatar, Algeria, Australia, and others, Norway, and the biggest one is Russia. These projects have come about because there's a demand for this. A lot of it is going to Southeast Asian countries of China and South Korea and Japan. They're the ones that are use of this gas, but others too. So what I'm trying to say is that in the past, when you had gas production with oil, you probably read or heard or seen, it was a nuisance to have. If you had gas production with oil production, associated gas, you say, oh my goodness, what do I do with the gas? We flared it, light it up, we lit it, burn it, useless, aha. Now it's a different story. Now, because of this environmental business, we collect it as precious fuel. Now we collect it as precious fuel. What a change in the demand for gas. Why connected with awareness of the environment? So here's an example of things that are connected in this business. That's what I'm trying to teach. Please, Yeah, anybody can say, well, everybody wants to talk about environment, but so what? You can read it. I didn't come here to tell you that. It's every paper, every front page of the paper. What my role is to show you how the connections are made between this and that. In this case, awareness of the oil environment leading to demand for gas. Yeah. So that's another change number, what is it, 6 here. Now let's talk, we've talked about offshore. Did I write an offshore? I think I did. Let me see. Yeah, number 5, and then environmental gas. I'm tempted to talk about new financing mechanism. It's a difficult decision. Should I teach that now, or should I teach that when I'm talking in the finance class, the regular finance class, about new ways to finance oil and gas projects? Should I do it now? And I think I should put it off till the right time when you say, well, what are the new ways to price oil and gas? No, finance oil and gas, not price, finance oil and gas projects, okay? Because it is a finance course, we have to talk about those kinds of things. And that's when I'll do this, okay? I'm just trying to see. Another thing that is happening around the world in the oil business, and it's all about oil business. So I don't have to keep on repeating the oil business, because that's the thrust of this lecture, is privatization of NOCs, national oil companies. Why? Why suddenly we hear national oil companies are privatizing? There are companies, and national oil companies that are, government has the main role, therefore called the national oil companies, and now they're moving into the private sector where you and I can buy the shares. So we as private people can be shareholders of a former NOC, and that is called privatization. Again, I have a plan to lecture on privatization at an appropriate time, maybe towards the end of the course, I think. And we'll address subject like, why do we need to privatize? Is it good or bad? How do we privatize? Who is privatizing? I mean, globally. So if you can hold on to that thought, okay, for a while. So write down number 7 would be privatization. Okay, let's just write down privatization. Seven, when I get up, I'll write down privatization. It's a big change, big change. So that would be number 7. Let me ask you this question. I know that we not communicate back and forth. When I say, let me ask, that means, now that is, I want you to start thinking. I'm going to give you the answer anyway. But since the new subject is coming, I want you to mind from privatization. Now, suddenly we first the environment, now privatization, now the next subject is going to be it's kind of in a form of a question, and then I'll answer it myself, because we don't have this two-way communication going on here. If I were to divide the world into 2 parts, that's it, 2 parts. Developed countries and developing ING countries of the world. So-called, I call it so-called, depending on how we look at it. Europeans are considered developed, Americans are considered developed economies. I'm not talking culturally developed and all that. I have a different opinion from that, from most anybody else. It could be culturally very highly developed, it have happened many times, but economically the country could be a little backward. Okay, so what I'm talking about, developed in the economic sense of Europe and America, and the developing countries, would be mostly in Africa, Latin America, and I don't have to go to the list. No, you know the list. Okay, I can, and take your time. Time is very precious, so I want to focus on this because I'm moving at a pretty fast pace as it is. We have covered a lot of ground. You'll be surprised how much you've followed my lecture and learned from it. So let's divide the world into 2 parts. developed and developing world. Where do you think today, now, where do you think is the world consumed more now? I'm frankly saying now, in the developed countries or developing countries? Developed with the ED at the end, developing with the ING. That's America and all that good stuff. I get all kinds of answers when I ask this question globally. Some say developed, some say developing. I would ask you the same question just for you to think. The answer is today. Today. Oil consumption is more in developing countries of China and India, cumulatively combined, and Brazil, than in developed countries. Why? Why do we have to talk about it? There must be a reason why developing countries consumption is going like this in oil and gas. Energy and oil and gas being one form of energy. This was not true in the past. In the past, most of it, consumption was in developed countries, not most, a good part of it, but more than the developing countries. Now it's the opposite. Why do we have to know that is another question. Let me take the case of China. If you haven't heard about what's happening in China in terms of economics and what they're doing, it's phenomenal. It's like a miracle. In my library here, which I'm sitting and looking at it, I've got, several hundred books. This is, all professors would like to read. There are more books on China and read more about China than any other book or autobiography. The other subject I like is autobiographies. People who've lived before or living now, who've done well in life. I'm not talking made mother, to me that's not important. Done well, what were the what was the reason they were so gloriously famous, okay? And so coming back to China, let's not get carried away with this pandemic business. This is an aberration. Aberration means happening for, how do I explain aberration? It's not real. It's something unreal. Well, it is real in the sense, the pandemic is there, but the question is, the world was flowing like this, the pandemic had changed everything, and after the pandemic, we don't know what the world will be like. So it's a little hiccup in the middle. I can't think of a better word for aberration. I normally can, but I can't think at the moment. Look up in the dictionary, aberration. Okay? It's an aberration. So having said that, let me get something to, excuse me, give me a second. I'll get a handkerchief, please. Give me a second. To save time, I have some clean paper towel. That will serve as a handkerchief. In the past, many years back, like 10 years back, 15 years back, the rate of growth of the Chinese economy, growth of the economy of the nation, any idea? I have figures to prove all that, I've got all kinds of figures over here, but that's if it's a 1-week course and I show figures and discuss from data and I send them to them first and then they will cover it. And I can't do that. It's a different course. What time? A couple of hours? How much can I do in a couple of hours? And I'm going non-stop, as you can tell. 13% growth. Growth means more use of energy, industrial output is more, therefore your energy usage is more, that's what growth does. Measured in terms of GDP, gross domestic product. And I can explain what that is the value of all the goods and services produced in a nation. If you want to become a super expert on GDP, Google it and you find out. Okay, so the point here is the Chinese economy was growing very, very, very fast. That's the point. While at that time in developed countries of America, Japan, Germany, and France, the growth of the economy was, 3 to 5% at best. Compared to China, 13%. What happens? Where is the consumption rapidly increasing for energy demand? Obviously in China. Same thing true with India. Same thing true with many of the African countries. You'll be very surprised. More recently now, I was surprised. What about here now? China, because again, it's an epidemic. This pandemic thing is distorted the picture. So I'm not going to talk about what is happening with pandemic. That could be a transition period that could go back to the old days. So we can't dwell on something that might not take place in the future. So let's talk about the world was still about a couple of years ago. Okay. So the Chinese and the developing countries of India and Indonesia and all that, the industry is really growing, the economy is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, more consumption for energy, amazing consumption for energy, whereas the economies of France and Germany, 3%, 4%. The result being what? More and more oil got produced, because it's consumed in the developing countries. Till now, we find, not long ago, 3-4 years, the developing countries' consumption has gone above more than the consumption in the developed world. So why is it necessary to know that? That means in the past, when we wanted to draw a graph and find out what the demand will be in the future for oil and therefore the price up or down, we primarily looked at the growth of the economies of the developed countries, the ones I've named just now. We now have to change a bit. So why we shall to forecast the demand for oil or gas, energy, why we should still looking at the developed countries, which in the past we did exclusively on the developed countries demand curve. Now we have to start looking also at the developing countries because that's where the demand is going pretty rapidly. That's the reason for that, to understand what the demand will be in the future, which then will impact the price of oil. We have to turn both ways, developed countries and developing countries, and together we'll get a halfway decent answer. That's why knowing what the consumption of, oil consumption pattern is in the world, I asked you the question, where do you think is the demand more in developing or developed countries? Many people are still stuck on the old, they haven't updated their knowledge in the old developed country stories. So that's where it is. Really, if I had the time, I could lecture for hours on what is happening in China. It's phenomenal. Just to give you an example, I wasn't lecturing in China several years back. Before then we had Beijing Olympics, not the winter, the regular big Olympics. No, yeah, there were Olympics, not the other one was more recently. If you're from Houston or you've been to Houston, we have a 610 loop ring around Houston. That's one. By the way, Houston is the 4th largest city in America. There's another loop, I think this highway or Beltway 8 or something like that. It's probably complete. So maybe at best we have got 2 loops around the 4th largest city in America. When I was in Beijing, I read what? In Beijing, they just completed loop number, I think it was 5. And by the time of Olympics, another 2 years from there, at that time, they would have 7 loops around Beijing. Now, why do I have to talk about loops around Beijing and Houston? What do you see in the on the loops in Houston? Donkey carts? Bicycles? Obviously, you know what we see. Look at the traffic jams of Houston. That's consumption in Houston. 2 loops. Now, there we are going to have 7. So can you imagine how much energy of oil is going to be used in Beijing alone, for which they're already preparing 7 loops compared to Houston's only 2 loops? That's to expect a future consumption pattern in China. Even then, which was 7, 8 years back, and I've been there more than once, the buildings and the structures were unbelievable in China. On and on. Even then, I would say that I had heard when I was growing up that seeing is believing. I said in China, that doesn't hold. Even when you see the growth taking place, buildings upon buildings, and you see it, but you can't still believe you're seeing what you're believing. You can't believe what you're seeing because it can't be real, heaven's sake. Unbelievable. Give an example. We talk about the growth of GDP and all that good stuff. But when we talk about loops around, what do they have, donkey carts, an average person can relate to that. GDP is a thing that the economists keep talking about. And I'm not here to impress the world with GDP stories. So, and the exports of China, everybody here, oh, China export, these there be a supply chain and all that problem as you've been hearing about or reading about. I read not long ago, forget the pandemic, this is something different and new, and we can't bring that every time we talk about any business. This is just a little blip, I hope it is. As it is today, as I was reading the paper, they say things have started improving, at least in Austin. That was the headline today. Still very, very bad, but we're thinking maybe things might be improving with this new Omicron or something. China exports so much. The question is how to relate to an average person in the street. Talk about GDP, say, get out of here. I don't care about your GDP. And what I read was for 8 ships coming out of China for export, 8 cargo ships coming out of China to export to the rest of the world, Europe and America and all over, there's only 1 ship, one, that is going back to China with goods cargo from overseas into China. 8 ships from Chinese manufacturers going outside selling stuff, and China is only 1 equivalent of a ship. The remaining 77 go back empty to fill up again. I think an average person can understand what I'm talking about. Doesn't take the genius of Abraham, the prophet. I'm not talking Abraham Lincoln here, I'm talking Abraham the prophet. So that is what China is about. Sometimes I say, well, enough is enough, just stop it, because once you get going on that, you won't stop. I can go on and on in every way. So all this energy is going there. The growth is unbelievable. Example, something else. Everybody talks about, the consumption of China and all that stuff. They're consuming so much. And of course, the biggest importer, they've got so many car manufacturers over there now. They never had any. Now to talk about production of China. Has anybody ever talked about production of oil in China? Never. Yet China is one of the biggest producers of oil in the whole world. Have you heard about that? One of the biggest producers of oil in the world. Unbelievable. Google it. I can't make up stories because in the next minute you're going to Google and say, Dr. Malay, come on now. Yeah, we always talk about Saudi Arabia, we got America, and we got Russia. We never hear about the big production. No, of course, I'm not saying that as big producer as Saudi Arabia or America or Russia, but they're still very big. They're bigger than most producer for most OPEC countries' production, except Saudi Arabia. Kuwait, they produce more than Kuwait, produce more oil more than Qatar. I'm not talking gas, Qatar is bigger. Oman, and all that. Abu Dhabi, Dubai. So that's to open your. And remember, I said that the nature of today's lecture is going to open your mind and not to focus on finance. So you have a global perspective, not only oil and gas. I'd like to concentrate on oil and gas, but keep it at the same time open. But starting next time, it's going to be different. It's going to be finance and finance and finance till the end of the semester. So this is your opportunity to listen to me and get a bigger picture, because this is the industry or economy of the oil business that you're inheriting. Inheriting means that you're going to be entering. My show is over. It's all behind me, but for you, it's the starting point. For me, it's even beyond the ending point. Okay. So we've talked about the developing countries. One thing leads to another. Let's write it down as number of changes. Let's the pen. Don't forget privatization. Well, when I say consumption, it's understood oil. So here are 8 developments in the oil industry. 8 of them so far. Now continuing. Number 9 is mergers and acquisitions activity. Things have slowed down a bit. I think the pandemic again is, everybody's working from home, it's online business, everything has changed. But for some time, the mergers, 2 companies like Exxon and Mobil merged. Gulf Oil, one of the biggest in the world, was acquired by Chevron in 1984. BP was merged with Amoco, and so on. Amoco was a large American company, okay, and so on. Very important subject. Why did they do it? How do they do it? Is it good or not good? What impact will that have on the oil industry? All these are relevant questions. Again, may I remind you one more time that this subject will be taken up in its entirety, 2 hours, maybe 1.5 hours. Again, after the spring break, towards the end. So all the real life situations like that, on privatization, mergers, acquisition, oil price, what to expect, netback pricing, trading of oil, all pushed to the back end of the course. The most important part early on, though everything is important, is where are you going to get the money to run your projects? That's what I want to focus on. That's the main thrust. That'll take us towards the spring and thereabout. A little maybe finished before or a little after. And the sources of capital. That's what I want to make sure you understand, because as engineers, you have to know that before you launch a project. From technical point, it's sound, but money has to be an important consideration. There's nothing you can do without it, like it or not. If you want to impress people, I've said before, use the word capital. Haha. That's one way to impress people. Wow, people get impressed with these fancy terms. Changes in technology, heaven's sake. Let me write it down. And I'm going to spend a little time. You write the whole word, mergers and acquisitions. Number 10, changes in technology. Yes, I don't know, I haven't said much yet. I'm going to explain all, because these are all connected, you see. Number 10 and 11 are connected, so I thought I'd put it here on the board. Territorial jurisdiction, write that down, please. I know you don't know what I'm saying at this time, but it's going to be an interesting part of the lecture. You're engineers. I don't tell you anything about technology. You're Mr. and Miss Technology yourself. You're looking at technologies, enhanced oil recovery, EOR, whoever is teaching it now is probably Dr. Lake. Maybe we keep changing. In fact, when my first course, a UT in 71 summer was thermal and miscible recovery. Wow, my goodness, I had no idea what I learned and still don't know what the heck it was. Anyway, I got some grade and still graduated, right? It's all related to technology. Logging is technology, drilling is technology. Now we're going to go beyond that. That I don't have to tell you about it. You are Mr. Technology or Miss Technology, okay? It'll take you to another direction that you're going to haven't heard about technology, to where I'm going to connect technology and change it to what? Get ready. To the United Nations. Wow, man. What has technology got? I make sure you can read all this before I start lecturing. And here I put an UNCLOS, UNCLOS. You notice that? What has the United Nations got to do with oil? United Nations has a law. It is called United Nations, UN, CLOS, Convention, CONVENTION, Convention on Law of the Sea, SEA. So United Nations has a law called United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. Generally abbreviated as UNCLOS. Okay? Why is that important for you to know? The oil business, very important. Under this law, nations have a jurisdiction in the sea, limit, the territory. How far is the territorial limits of UK or USA in the Gulf of Mexico? How far can America say, this is the Gulf of Mexico, this is mine? And when does the Mexico say, well, come on, man, this is mine, this Gulf is mine. It says Gulf of Mexico, it must be mine. Where do you draw the line? UK and Norway, same story. Her Majesty says, get out of here, you Norwegians. You don't belong here. This is my North Sea. The guy in Norway says, I think his name is King Olaf. I used to go to Norway every year, very cold. In fact, at some time, I used to teach simultaneously during the spring semester in Austin and Norway, going back and forth. So where do you draw the line between nations? And so on and so on and so on. There comes the United Nations. Jurisdiction, let me spell it. Juris, jurisdiction, DICTION, jurisdiction. So according to UNCLOS, the United Nations says, when it comes to how far in the sea is your territory, where you are in charge, you the nation, where is your jurisdiction, meaning where you're in charge, extends 200 miles from your coastline, 200 miles into the sea, into the Gulf of Mexico, that's yours, as far as we're concerned. US and Norway, you got 200 miles into the North Sea. So what happens? That's been established. But that has got a lot of problem. Give you an example between Norway and the UK. Did I say the limit is 200 miles? That's why I put on that. Let's see if I. Can you see that? I hope you can. Yeah. There's a map here, supposed to be. Is UK, Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth. In fact, this February, I think 6th or something like that, they could have a big hullabaloo, big celebrations in England, one of the biggest ever, You know why? Oh, you should read up the paper, you should. It's February for sure, but I think it's the 6th. You're going to give everybody a holiday and all that good stuff. Why? That will establish the Queen as the longest reigning monarch in UK history. That means nobody has been a king or a queen in the history of the United Kingdom for so long. And you know how long? That is going to be 77 years of her reign. So that means she's been king or queen of England, or she's been queen or king for 70 years. No monarch has been that long. The next one that comes is Queen Victoria, I believe. And she was the monarch for 63 years. So Queen Elizabeth beaten her by 7 years. Okay, how about that for energy finance class? This is more fun to teach. This Queen Elizabeth business with energy finance. Fun and boring. Okay, never mind. I try to make it interesting by throwing the Elizabeth story in there somewhere. Norway is King Harald. I think that's the king. Let me talk about King Harald. Oh, forget about that. That's to break the monotony. When I'm talking, lecturing overseas in person, I do a lot of the side little stories, make things interesting, and then I start again because I lecture for 40 minutes nonstop, then a little story, and then they relax and they go again. I'm not in favor. No, I'll come back to that. Don't worry about it. Okay. Just make you relax and they say, okay, let's see the other side of Dr. Malik. He looks pretty boring. Hey, maybe he's not that boring. Okay, let me tell you. I'm not in favor of monarchies. Simple. No opinion. I don't like monarchs. I just don't. You may like monarch. I don't care. I don't. I like one. I only like one monarch. So why do you like him? You know why? And who is he? Only one in the whole world. He's the king of Norway. I like him. No other. You know why? I'll tell you why. When you see the UK thing and all the buggy, the big horses going like this and the queen sitting in the back and all that good stuff, coronation happening, blah, 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 blah. And all fleet of cars in the front, security in the back. This is a big, big show. And everywhere, not only her, but other places. But I should told you that I used to go to Norway very often, very cold. And my nephew has passed away, sadly, my sister's son, who lived in Norway. And I would go by, besides teaching, I would go to see him, a fine young man. On one of my trips, I was staying at the hotel called Oslo Plaza, nice fancy hotel. And I was standing outside Oslo Plaza Hotel with my nephew. And I remember only one car. No, you're standing outside the hotel, one car, solo, singular, uno, came in front of the hotel, entrance, there's a door to the hotel going in. And I'm watching, he's like within 10 feet of me, this car. And a person came out of the car, one person, alone. This person was kind of a tall fellow, maybe 6'6" or something. My nephew lives there in Norway or Oslo. He asked me, his uncle. Yeah. Who do you, and this fellow, got out the car and he entered the hotel with somebody who was waiting to receive him, like a friend, hey buddy, like you meet somebody in the hotel at the entrance, waiting for somebody, like a friend, like. And my nephew asked, and the person who came out of the car shook hands with one man standing outside the hotel, like a friend, and they both walked inside, just like two friends. And my nephew asked me, who just got into the hotel from the car he got out? I said, I don't know. He probably, he's a guest in the hotel. Who else would go in the hotel at this time? He's probably staying here. He said, no, sir. He said, no, my uncle, no. I said, what? He has his own house. I said, what do you mean? He said, he's the king. He has his own house. Meaning what? Now, how can you not like that king? Tell me. Who can, no fanfare, no buggy, no motorbikes in the front and the back. I don't think he was driving his own car. I think it's somebody else driving. Now, how can you not like the guy? So having said that, I thought I'd relate that story to you. So that's my kind of a king. I don't mind him. If everybody was a king like that, yeah, I'll go have hamburger with him. Probably went into the hotel, had a hamburger with his friend. Who knows? Never mind. That's precisely the story. Now coming back to where were I? Oh, where were I? Norway and the UK. Get your thoughts back again. Get your thoughts. There is Norway, there is UK, and this is North Sea. Remember, UNCLOS is 200 miles jurisdiction. From Norway to UK, the separation is not 400 miles. So what happens? A company comes and says, let us drill here. This is 200 miles. It's Norwegian territory. Another one says, no, let's go from UK and we'll go drill here. And this is within the UK territory. This is Norwegian. Do you see a problem? There's a problem there. Overlapping. Because the United Nations established the limit. Now, these things are happening all over the globe. Because why? Technology. Because in the past, no company could go 200 miles away from Norway and drill because the water was too deep. So the question of whose territory does not arise, who cared about the United Nations, because it is a moot question, it's a meaningless question, but not now. Now you know what technology has done, a little bit of technology here for you guys. Think and tell me, what is the depth of the water? I mean, here is the water, and here is the depth of the Gulf of Mexico, or whatever, This is the surface, this is the depth of the water in the Gulf. How much deep water depth can you drill these days in offshore areas? I'll reveal that to you. 11,000 feet of water. That means you can have 11,000 feet of water and then start your drilling from that bottom at 11,000 feet. That means you can go way out into the sea to drill thanks to technology. Yesterday, we did not have the technology, so we didn't have to worry about the United Nations and overlapping because everybody stayed closer to the coastline. That's what technology has done in some areas. Here is an example. Norway and UK have settled their issue on this amicably, friendly way. And I teach that. How did they settle it? In part of the agreements course. Not this. The different ways. Mexico and America has, United States also has a problem there in the Gulf of Mexico. They've settled it in another way. In other countries, Nigeria and Cameroon has a problem, and so on. How have they settled it? Australia and Indonesia have a problem. How have they settled it? So all those different ways, and you'll be surprised. One thing will surprise you, most people don't know about it. Kuwait has a problem with Iraq. Every child knows that. You've heard about it enough. But not many heard about there's a problem between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia on oil business, territory of oil. There's a way to settle that. Talk about that, how they did settle it, very nicely. No fighting, no war. So that leads to a discussion, as I said, about the United Nations. So you never know what my lecture may take me. I've talked about growth of non-OPEC production. No, not yet. I would say about a third, I'm talking generally, maybe 35 to 38%, depending on time of the day, which day. A third is an easy number to remember, maybe 40%. Oil in the world is produced from OPEC country, by OPEC country, in OPEC country. A third, a little more, percent. 2/3 of the oil is produced not in OPEC. Why do I have to say that? Because we always talk about OPEC, 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 OPEC. Heaven's sake. Most of the oil, by far more oil is produced in non-OPEC than OPEC. I'll give you an example. Like just to give you the example of China. Brazil produces 2 million barrels a day, not OPEC. Russia and America produce as much oil as Saudi Arabia. Maybe now we probably produce more than Saudi Arabia, about the same maybe. Russia, non-OPEC, America, non-OPEC, and Saudi Arabia, the three largest producers of oil in the world, 10 million plus minus 500,000, depending on various factors. That's 30 million or maybe 30 to 35 million of the world's oil is produced in these three countries. Only two are, the two are non-OPEC, only Saudi Arabia. So that's the point. There's a lot of non-OPEC production. I just said China. Kazakhstan is not OPEC. They produce a lot of oil. Australia, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, by heaven's sake, how can we forget that it's not OPEC? Canada, our neighbor to the north, not OPEC. On and on and on and on. Non-OPEC production is Argentina. Of course, there are African countries. We can know, Angola, no, Angola, by the way, has recently become a member of OPEC, so I correct myself. Okay. Some countries have dropped out of OPEC, and some countries have joined OPEC. And not apart. If I had 1 week on this subject, then we discuss why should we be a member of OPEC? Is it good or bad? And so on. And I said countries that I've traveled in, many OPEC countries, and it's a bad idea. But to me, I'm a teacher. I'm not going to tell them what they want to hear. I'm not going to tell them what they don't want to hear. I just tell them the way I feel. That's why they say, come down, tell other people how you feel. Doesn't mean you're right or wrong. I give them the way I look at it like this. And most of these people have attended courses not like similar courses, dozens of times. And I tell them when they walk in, I say, look here, there's going to be one difference. All the so-called consultants and all that you've been listening to, they've told you about the oil business from this side. The only reason I'm here is to talk about the oil business from this side. Does it mean that I'm right? At least now you've seen what? Both sides. Now you decide whichever you like. That is what is missing in the oil business. One consultant copies another consultant, the same story. They're never different. I said, okay, man, if you want to hear the same story, don't call me. So, as they said, I've been traveled corners, Egypt practically every day. When I go somewhere, they always say, when can you come back? I was in just before the pandemic, I was in South Africa teaching this thing. Peru, every year. And when I say every meaning, what every year? Because they hear me say, no, come back. The other people need to listen to you. No, in Kuwait and other countries, in Australia and Indonesia and Taiwan, even China, Italy, of course, countless times. In Spain, Argentina, Nigeria, Angola. My God, I forgot Angola. On and on and on and on. So again, I don't want to be showing off. That's not a good thing, but I want you to feel, oh boy, man, this fellow knows what he's talking about. He's been everywhere. Not showing, just to give you the confidence. I have enough confidence. I don't have to have, I want you young men to say, hey, man, this is, so pass it on. These are not common things that people talk about. So once you have the knowledge, it's your responsibility, your duty to give it on. If you like what you, don't keep it here. Move forward. Let others benefit from it. If you think it's right, if you agree with it, move on. That's the philosophy of my life. Why am I teaching now at my age? Because I feel like, boy, what little I have to give it to somebody else. You happen to be the so-called target at this time, okay? And never mind, I get carried away sometimes. So there's a lot of growth of non-oil production. I'll write on globalization. If I know season, I'll talk. I'll write on non-OPEC. I'm trying to see this room at the bottom that I can write. Yeah, I think I can. Yeah, but okay. No. Because when I stand here, I'm covering what I've written. So I'm trying to territorial number 12, growth of non-OPEC. Okay. There's number 2. Yeah, I've got room there. In fact, today I was talking about this with somebody else, And I was riding in a car with that person. And I said that, who assisted me with setting up this screen and everything. I said, when I'm teaching overseas in person, teaching versus teaching you online, I said to her that teaching in person takes twice, maybe 3 times more effort on my part than teaching online. No, the other way. Teaching online is 3 times more intense than teaching in person, 3 times. So teaching here 2 hours I get, versus teaching 6 hours in person. The fatigue, the tiredness. Here, if it's 2 hours, it's like 6 hours in person. Because when in person, I can teach for 6 hours non-stop, well, non-stop 7 hours, because there's an exchange. Then you can walk around the room. Then you put transparencies, slides. Then you have a pointer. You look right, maybe you look at the window here. So all these are, ways where you kind of lessen the burden on like here I have to go on, and therefore I have to spend maybe a week there. So to do this, what I do in a very short time here. So you're looking like a 6-hour lecture, where if I were lecturing to overseas to accompany people, because as you can tell, I'm not, you're the audience. This is not the way I do in person when they're across the table, because there's a lot of exchange there, that lessens my burden. I like that, but in here I have to go on, and so do you. But you have the advantage again of walking away, and picking up for half an hour there, and after Dr. Malik, I'll come back tomorrow and pick up the remaining half an hour. So anyway, so you don't feel like, oh, it's a 2 hour. It's not a 2 hour, it's like a 6-hour lecture somewhere else, okay? I'm just trying to share my inner thoughts, but I like to do it. Do I get tired? You better believe it. Do I get very tired? You better believe it. Can I sit up straight after this? No, I can't. But there I teach lecture day after day after day, no problem. It's totally different. But I'm not regretting it. If I didn't want to, I just don't have to do it. And I said, enough is enough. I'm old enough to just to sit on the beach. But before I do that, I'll commit suicide. To me, I can't imagine people what they do in the beach is their problem. Okay, well, that's sideways. What is next here? What did I write? Globalization. Did I say globalization? No. Growth of non-OPEC, we've talked about it, I think. Yeah. Globalization of NOCs. Yeah, I'm going to make sure. The thing is, when I'm looking at the board, I'm looking at myself, but it's all behind me. Okay. There are words that you can use to impress people. There are many words that have come about in conversation that I never heard in my life before. And I hear people talk about to be impressed, is fashionable. One of them is globalization. I never heard that word after 5 years before this. Every time the oil, the industry is global, the economy is global. What? I have no idea what they're trying to say. I can say internationalization of NOCs, but it's not sound very impressive. Globalization. I'm going to talk about it. Let me prepare you to that word. Another word that I hear, which never, these are strategic alliances. What? I said, I know what is alliance. What the dickens is a strategic? Oh, that's impressive, man. You throw the word strategic, oh, everybody's listening. On the side, I'll joke about this. Young men, young women these days, you ask them, how are you doing? And nothing with this lecture. I want to lighten you. You've been here more than 2 hours, I think, listening to me. And I asked them, so, how are you doing, young man or young woman? I'm doing good. I'm good. That has become normal with young men. These days, some of my friends who are older, And I asked him, how are you doing? I'm doing good. I said, hey, John, you're my age, remember? What's this good business? I'm asking you, how are you doing? Whether you're good or not, it's not what I'm asking. That I will decide you're good or not good. So what I'm saying here is, there are a lot of things happen. I never heard the word good before 5 years. Everybody, I'm okay. Thank you very much. Nice you asked, that. But young men, don't worry. You keep going with your good business. So the older people like me will throw the fashionable. Same thing that they get wide, they get narrow. What's the difference between narrow and wide? It's fashionable. 3-button, 2-button. Why? Fashionable. And why am I saying not waste? I am going to talk about it under mergers and acquisitions. The word fashionable will come up again. Okay, don't think I'm just throwing things at you like that. Maybe preparing you for something else that you don't realize I'm doing at the moment. Now back to the lecture itself. Globalization of NOCs. We have kind of talked about it, but I want to bring forth what in 3 words what I meant when I was talking about it. You'll see the connection with my early part of the lecture. NOCs, the word NOC stand for what? National Oil Company. National. But what that companies in the past look for oil nationally in the country. That's not true anymore. These so-called national oil companies have become very international, or you can call it global, and then you call it globalization of NOCs. Many of the big ones now are not the Exxons and the Chevrons. Petronas, I mentioned, Malaysia. You probably haven't not heard about it. They're amazing company. Fastest growing company beside the Chinese and the Indians that I can think about. Here, one reason, because they pay so much attention to training and education. They're like a university. They offer 3 times more courses in petroleum engineering the company does than our department, which is the largest department in the world for petroleum engineers. And this company alone, that's what it is. Knowledge. There are in more countries looking for oil today than is Exxon or Chevron. How do I know? I used to go there. That's how I found out. But some of us still living in the past. Oh, the Seven Sisters, the Shells, and and most of these are moving into non-oil anyway. They're going to gas and all the other fancy stuff. Gas is okay, but into wind, My daughter works for a wind company, they're doing quite well. But we can talk about that another. We need all sorts of energy sources, oil and gas and nuclear. And I was in the world's largest nuclear project. For many years, world's largest nuclear project, folks, is sitting here in our backyard. It's the largest in the whole world. I was in the committee in the 70s when I was in the late 20s, early 30s. It's called the South Texas Nuclear Project. South Texas Nuclear Project. We own City of Forest, partly owned by city. We have a municipality that generates electricity, owned by the city, us, you and I, citizens of Austin. And 16% of that project is ours, yours, residents of Austin, 16%. We'll talk about that later on under project finance. So I'm not throwing this here in the air. It's going to be part of something about project finance with how do we finance that project? And how big was it? Was it delayed? What happened when it got delayed in producing electricity? So all these things that what has that to do with it? No, yeah, believe me, I'm throwing these different things because I'm going to catch them later on when it talks about project finance. Remember I said talk about project finance, part of the lecture. Okay. So here we are, globalization, national Petrobras, Brazilian national, so many countries. And the biggest of all are the Chinas. everywhere. The thing is, they don't make a lot of noise. We make a lot of noise here, the whole world knows what we do. Okay, they keep going and slowly but surely. They're going to look for oil, and sometimes they acquire something overseas in the oil patch or oil area. Or sometimes they explore. Latin America, the other one, another globalization situation is with the Indian ONGC. Okay, overseas, all over the world. Okay, because previously the technology was residing in the brains and of the internationals, of the Exxon, the Chevron, the Shell, and the BP. Now it's easy to get that knowledge. Look at me. I'm going around the world. There are 100 like me, sharing the same knowledge I'm sharing here with the same knowledge I'm giving somebody else and yet somebody else. So the knowledge is widespread now. It's easy to acquire. Get it? Same consultants are giving to Shell is same is giving to the National Company of India. So that's become much easier. Okay. So that comes under terrorism. Okay. And not under globalization, because the next change I'm going to talk about is terrorism. Terrorism, people have just recently learned, Al-Qaeda. No. Al-Qaeda terrorism is another story. I've been talking about Al-Qaeda terrorism before there was Al-Qaeda anybody knew about it. I'll give you an example. I cite your country. You probably heard about one guy, for sure, I know him. You know him personally, probably. He's probably a friend. But he's dead. Heard of Pablo Escobar from Colombia? What did he deal with? And, whatever you folks take, I don't know. So, Colombia used to produce a lot of oil. It was produced in the mountains of the Andes. It had to be shipped to the port in Colombia. By the way, Colombia is a country, in case you wonder. There's a pipeline from the production platform area to the port. And what did your friend Pablo Escobar do? If the government didn't follow his advice, he would blow up the pipeline. So a lot of expenditures the companies had to incur, lots of it. BP was big over there, just to keep the pipeline's safety. So terrorism, that's terrorism. It's just not blowing up the tower. It comes up. One of the biggest problems these days, big one, is piracy. Piracy is about terrorism in the sea. I'm going to tell you something that you never will hear again, and you never will believe me. And I know that. And it's not possible. Piracy. Okay, but a laptop was, lot of oil moves in the sea. And piracy is taking place there. Mostly in the areas of Strait of Malacca, that is the sea between Indonesia and Singapore and Malaysia. So that is causing a lot of problems. Okay, I think I'll stop here. That's enough for today. And I hope you have a good time. Take care of yourself. And that ends today's lecture. Next time we'll start with finance. Okay, thank you very much.